Hi everybody, welcome to a new tutorial from Sound for More. In this video we are going to go through a full tutorial on how to use the new visual synthesizer from Imaginando, a fantastic new app which allows you to create stunning visual effects also using music. Before I start with the tutorial, I would like to remind my viewers to subscribe. That help with supporting the channel, bringing more videos, tutorials, giveaway, and also please also check if there is a giveaway open, just expanded the video description, and in there you find the rules if the giveaway is still open. So let's start. We are inside AUM, and I'm going to create an audio channel, and I'm going to load the visual synthesizer, which I'm going to call VS for now. Like so, type in VS and we're going to load it. As you can see, loads pretty quickly. Okay, let's expand it, and this is what it looks like. As you can see, you are presented with this blue image or circle or elastic band just moving around. This is what is called a material, which is being rendered on the screen. And you can see also the button here, there are a number of buttons, 1 to 8, which are the layers, similar to what you would think layers in a music synth. Of course, because it is a visual effect app, what you're going to render on the screen are materials, and you're not going to have music render, although you have some option to actually play music internally, like the demo here. But let's go through the controls one by one, and I will show you how to use it. And then I'll give you also some use cases as well. So starting from the top left, here we have a menu. You click on it, and you can click again on it to disclose it. We have the profile here, which you can register, sign up, and then log in. Here you have your MIDI settings, where you can see your input devices and also the output as well. You can go to the settings, and this is quite an important one because here you can set the frame rate, and also you can change the quality up and down, which helps when you are having, for example, problems in terms of performance. And the way to immediately see if you have problems is looking at this number here, where it says a frame per second, FPS. So if you see that dropping quite a bit, perhaps you want to decrease the quality. Here you can also establish how many voices you are going to have as a settings, which the voice will be the number of instances of the same materials which are rendered, which I will show you later. Here you have your about, okay, which you click on the top again to exit. Then you have your help here, which will move you to an online help. And at the bottom here you have the Imaginando logo. So let's close this. Moving on, we have the logo here for the visual synth. At the bottom here you have a question mark for actually give you, it will give you a little bit of tips. It's not really a true help, is quite short as well. Okay, and you click on skip that to come out of it. Here you have an option of MIDI learn if you want to connect, of course, an external controller, and learnings on how to use external knobs to modify some of the parameter of the app. You use that. You have indication of where the clock source is coming, which is a host, because inside AUM. Here it says demo. It says disable. If you click on it, you have a choice of a number of tracks that you can play to actually drive some of the visual effect. Let me show you some of them. And I will show you that later on how to use those. You have the tempo here, which is set as per AUM host. And then here you have the list of patches. So if you click on it, it will go to selection of patches screen, which is very familiar in terms of how Imaginando have created previous applications. So if you use previous application from Imaginando, you find these very straightforward. You see also the partnership here with Perplexon, in terms of some of the patches created for the app. So let's choose one, okay, and you can see rendered on the screen, okay. You see straight away the frame per second which are dropped, okay, and that's important to keep in mind. Here you can save the patch. Here you can revert it to the original state, and it will ask you a question, yes or no. And then here you can go up and down to the next patch, like so. Now let's click on the patches here. Let's click on default, and we go back to the default one. Now, I mentioned here you have the frame per second, and so keep an eye on that. And if you're having performance issue, you see here on the screen the material rendered. If you click on the button here, right, where you have this image, you go to full screen. If you exit that, double click on it. Okay. Then moving on, here you have do and undo, redo and undo, do undo and buttons as normally works to undo or redo your last actions. Then here you have a color selection. So click on it and you can choose the color of the material which is being rendered. Of course, you need to have selected the right layer. So in this case, I had layer 8, which is not creating any changes. Let's go to layer number 1 and we can change the color, and you can see change to yellow. You have also the top, it says normal. If you click on that, you have different ways of blending colors between layers. And I'll show you that in a moment. To close these, you have to close again here on the circle on the color selection. You can add additional materials, so you click on the next layer, and here you either click and hold, and then it gives you a selection of materials, which is a browsing of material itself. So let's say, for example, we want to choose this circle here. Okay, it will show you that is not enabled. So you don't see it. So it's because here at the bottom left it says enable off. So click on off and it will come on. Again, you can change the color here as well. Okay, as I previously showed you. But you can also change the material simply just double clicking on the layers. And for example, let's choose something different like these. Not this one actually, probably this one. Okay, and the reason I chosen this one is because I wanted to show you how to blend the color. So if I go back to the previous layer and I click on the color selectors, now let me choose change the mode of blending. So let's go for difference, and you see it's making the way that it treats the color between one layer, and depending on the mode, it can be either a difference, it can be subtracted, it can be multiplied, etc., etc. I suggest that you try some of those mode yourself, and you can see you can create some stunning effect. But in terms of the tutorial, let's continue with the normal settings. If you click and hold on a material, you can of course go back to the materials browse, but you can also copy and paste and reset. So let's say I want to copy that. I go to another layer, I click and hold, and I select paste, and I have pasted another material. If I want to remove the material, click and hold. I have different options. First of all, I could reset the settings of that particular layer, and so I could reset the parameters of the material or the modulation metrics, which I'll show you in a moment. Like you can select them all and click reset. But if you want to remove the material, as I was just saying, just click on material and then go up to the very top and select plain color. And of course, when you are in that mode, you might want to then select a different background, like so, for example. But remember, if you change the selection here, will change also how things are rendered. So for the purpose of continuing the explanation, let me click on revert the patch to the original state, click yes, and then select the first layer, double click on it, and choose the default material. Okay, so we are back at the beginning. Now, there are 8 layers here, but there is also an additional one where it says B, and this is for background. So if you double click on it, it gives you a choice of selecting files from your iOS device. Click cancel. If you click on old, you can go to a selection of files, which I just showed you, or you can go to resources. And here's where you can load some default resources that comes with the application. For example, texture. But what you can do, you can also load videos. So let's scroll down and let's choose, I don't know, this video here, right? And then you can click load and you have a video played in the background. If you notice at the bottom here, you have a number of controls and these changes based on the layer that has been selected, as you can see. Now, when you are in the background layer, you see options like rate for the frame rate for the video, but also if the video is played in a loop mode or if it is still, and then you can change the position, of course, manually like that. Or if it is being played, you can select the starting frame, the end frame, and you can also select the fill mode between crop and fit. As you can see, it's been fit in the screen. Of course, you can load other things, like, for example, photos. So let's load this Sound for More logo. Okay, and yeah, as you can see, it has been loaded. Okay, and then you can act, of course, on some of the control, and you can use modulation controls also to alter some of the parameters. So you can see I'm acting on the X position, on the Y position. Double click to go back to the top state here, to the 0 state. You may not want to do that, but if you double click, that is what it does. And you can rotate it, of course, double click to go back to the to 0. You can scale it, and you can also use an alpha channel as well to change the transparency. And this is important. If I click on the first layer and I act on the alpha channel to change the level of transparency, sorry, I click too much and I open up the lower part of the screen. So I click on this arrow here to close it for now. So I can click and move, and look what happens. I change the alpha channel for that layer, and therefore it will affect all the other layers because the layer number 1 is the top one. And that is something to remember. Okay, so let me give you another example, right? So let's set this down to 0. Let me open the second layer and let's load this material. And let's enable it. Okay, you can see there. If I was now to change the alpha channel on the first layer, like so, it will make disappearing all the other layers after layer number 1, so including layer number 2, not only the background. But if I was only to act on the second layer on the alpha channel, you see, yeah, layer number 1 and 2 will still be visible, but it will start to fade away the background because the background comes lower in priority in terms of stacking the different layers. So the top layer is number 1 and the bottom layer is the background here. Okay, let's revert to the original state again, so it's quicker instead of resetting all the different parameters. Okay, there we are. When you have selected a layer, you can enable or disable it, clicking on here. You can also have it on a solo, which is the same option that you have in Sync for Music app, to just have that material being played. But of course, in a Sync it might be an oscillator, or it might be a layer or something else. Okay, so, and again, to show you that, let's load a second layer, let's enable it, and then let's say I want to solo that layer number 2, so I see only layer number 2. I go to layer number 1 and I solo that, I'll see only layer number 1. And of course, I can now unsolo that layer for layer number 1, and then I see both layers. Now let's go to the second layer and let's disable that for now, so we focus only on the first one. So as I mentioned, we have an alpha channel here as a parameter. You can change the brightness as well. Okay, you can see that it's getting thinner and to the point that it will disappear. And also by default, you have an envelope generator, again, similar to the musical concept, which will affect brightness. And the way to see that, if you expand the panel below, this is the modulation metrics, okay? And you can see a 1 here, which means the envelope generator number 1 is affecting a maximum the brightness parameter for this layer which has been selected. While I'm here, I wanted to show you also that you can, of course, close the panel like that, open it like that, and then you have a button here which is applicable only between layer 1 and 8. If you click on it, you can switch from the view where you have your LFOs, envelope generator, and audio modulations, and the modulation metrics. Okay, right. So let's close that panel now. So let's continue with an explanation of the controls for this particular material. So you have speed, straightforward, X position, Y position, radius, okay. Noise, if you set it to 0, it doesn't move, but if you increase it a lot, you have a lot more noise. And you have glow. Right. Something else I wanted to show you is these two buttons here. It says mono and trigger. So let's select trigger, which will set MIDI. And you have two more options: enable channel, which will be for the MIDI channel, and glide, which is similar to your portamento with one note and the other. So let's connect the AOM keyboard. Let's press some the keys. One key, you have one circle. Another one, you have 2, 3, 4, up to 4, maximum of 4 voices. Now, if I was to close that and enable mono, okay, and I reopen the keyboard, well, I have only one voice. So that's similar to the concept of mono in synth up, but that is applied in this case to the number of materials which are rendered. So let's remove mono. Let's click the trigger. By the way, the other thing I wanted to show you, which I forgot, you can use the channel here. And so you can set it to, for example, 2. And if you set it to 2, in this case, the keyboard will not have an effect because it's set by default to use channel number 1. But of course, you can reset it to number 2. And in the case, it will receive only for number 2. So it's a bit of filtering. Okay, so remember that you can do that as well. But let's click on MIDI trigger none. So you have the material rendered again. Now, I always like to revert the material to the default state, just in case I forget some of the settings, because there's quite a lot of settings. Sometimes you can have undesired effects if you don't remember what you have selected before. And because I'm doing a tutorial, I prefer to explain it with the standard or default patch. So I'm explaining how to use mono, trigger, channel, and some of these basic settings for this material. Of course, this setting changes based on the material. Example, let's go to layer number 2. Actually, let's stay on layer number 1. So let's close that, stay to layer number 1, double click on it, and let's choose, for example, this one here, the box. And you can see immediately you have a rotation on the x-axis, on the y-axis, and also thickness. So it's different. You have different settings based on what material you are selecting. Okay. So again, let's go back to the default material. Okay, right. So let's continue the explanation. So let's open now the control panel here. So let's start from this one. You have an LFO here. Again, similar to the concept of LFO in Music Up. You have 4. You can select the type of waveform, in this case sine. You have the rate. Let's increase the rate, so go faster. You can also sync the rate to the os tempo. In the case you see these as a fraction as you move the rate. Okay, let's disable that. You can also have phase set to 3 or to key. So if you set to key, every time you press a key, you will see here, I'm pressing several times the key, the phase restarting. Okay, so let's close these. Let's hide the keyboard. Let's go back inside it, maximize it again. Right, so how do I use LFOs to impact visual effects? Well, let's say that I'm happy with these settings. It is LFO number 1. So I go to the modulation metrics. Here you see on the left parameters, which are related to the layer and material that it is selected. So in this case, I could say change the brightness using LFO1, and you can change that clicking and moving up and down, holding, of course, your finger on the screen on mouse button, and you change the influence, okay, on the brightness. And you can see it's changing up and down because the waveform selected for the LFO number 1 is sine. You might just say, well, great, that's brightness, but could I change other parameters like the X position, the Y position? Certainly you can do that. So let's double click to reset that the LFO1 for brightness. Now, the way to get to the other parameters, here you see an horizontal bar and you have 3 sections. The first one is selected, so let's click on the second one. So now you have access to parameters like speed, X, Y, and radius. If you click on the last one, you have access to noise and glow. Another way to access the parameter on the modulation metrics quickly is more like a shortcut. Click and hold on a parameter and it will move you to the modulation metrics position where the parameter is visible. So in this case, X, because I clicked and hold on the X settings or control. So let's click here now to influence the X position through LFO1. So you can see it's moving left and right. You can do that vertically as well. So you can use, of course, for LFO. So double click to reset it. Okay. Then next you have 2 envelope generators, and then after that you have 4 audio modulation, and then keyboard settings, and also a velocity setting or modulation settings for velocity and keyboard. So let's go back to the screen where we can see the LFO. And so next here you see the envelope generators. Okay. So in order to see this, let's go to the modulation metrics. Let's increase here envelope generator 1 for position X. Let's open the AUM keyboard and let's click on the keyboard. You can see it's changing position. As you see, it moves very quickly from one position to the next. That's because if you go back to the envelope generator, the attack is very low and also the release is not that much. So envelope generator are normally used for a DSR, for attack, decay, release, and sustain. In this case, you have only attack and release. And so in this case, attack is used to establish how long it will take to go for the envelope generator to affect the parameter of the material selected. So in this case, if I make the attack longer and I bring up the keyboard, it will take longer to move to that position. Release is very quick. So if I increase the release as well, you will find that when I release the key on the keyboard, it will move slowly back. Now you see that better if you remove the noise like that and going back. Okay, so that is how you can use envelope generators. And in this case, I was influencing the X position of the material on layer number 1. Double click on it to reset it. Okay, next I'm going to show you how you can use audio to manipulate visual effects. So you have 4 audio modulations here, engine. And so 1 to 4, you can set it to gate or also to spectrum. In spectrum, you can choose a frequency. And I will show you a demonstration or use case in a moment. So let's go back to gate. Here you have a threshold selection, which moves the horizontal bar up and down. So that means that the audio signal needs to be above that line to create a modulation on the parameter that is selected. You can act on a gain of the waveform, of the input waveform. If you have, that helps with going above that threshold, for example, for waveforms where the volume or the gain is very low. And then you can also acting on attack and release, which means in this case that when it goes above the threshold, it will use the attack for example, setting to determine how quickly it will modulate the parameter that is selected. So And this is where you need to use an audio input or an audio source. You can, of course, do that connecting through different connection in AUM, but you can also use the demo track, which I mentioned at the beginning of the tutorial. So let's go to demo here and let's click on the first one. Let's mute the channel so that you hear my voice. So the waveform is still being played. You can see here. Now, let's go to the modulation metrics and let's say that click and hold the radius. We are already there. Let's say for audio modulation 1, we want to change the radius. Here we go. It's starting to move up and down based on the waveform level. So now let's move up the threshold. So we'll move less because I want to only modulate on the peaks, like so. All right. And this is where, you can act now on the attack. You see, it's moving less now because it takes longer to move up, and because it's changing rapidly, it almost looks like it's not moving at all, but it is moving. And that's quite cool because you can create that vibration type of effect. So you could now lower the threshold, it will move a little bit more. You can go to the metrics, increase the modulation intensity, go back to the previous screen, increase the attack as well. You can see it's changing as well. So you can create a different effects. And of course, let's have some music now. Okay, so hopefully these explain the basics of how to use the Visual Synth app. Now let's show you some example. So let's go back to the original state and let's load that default material. Let's set the noise to low, like so. Okay. Now let's say that I want to. I tell you what. Let's actually remove. Start from scratch in AUM. Let's create an audio channel and also a MIDI channel. Let's load something like a grand piano, in the input node. We load VS or Visual Synth as an insert effect because you can do that. And in that case, you have the audio coming from grand piano into VS. Let's click on the MIDI processor. Let's choose something like step pad. Like so. Then let's connect step pad to the grand piano and also to the VS, the Visual Synth. Great. Let's go inside step pad. Let's choose a scale like a minor one. Let's go lower an octave. Then let's change the gate. I want more gating time, the rate. Let's go lower, half, and then let's generate some random note quickly, like so. Let's close that, open VS, maximize these, and click play. Okay, so now it is playing, nothing is happening, of course. So now let's show you what you can do. So let's set the noise down to 0, so it doesn't move, the material doesn't move. Perfect. And then let's go to the modulation metrics, and let's say that audio modulation number 1 will impact, click and hold on the radius here. Oops. Let's go inside there. Radius, okay. Modulation, audio modulation 1. Let's increase this. Okay, like so. Let's then lower the threshold, increase the gain, and let's see what it looks like. Okay, so nice already. Change a bit bigger the radius. Okay, so now let's go to the second layer, click and hold. Let's go to materials. Let's choose this material here. Let's enable that. Let's change the color to yellow because I like yellow. Let's decrease the radius. Let's close these. And let's move the position X a little bit out there. Okay, now for this material, what we are going to do, we're going to say envelope generator number, keyboard, because I haven't showed you the keyboard yet. So for the input which are coming to VS, let's change the X position like so. Let's click play. See, based on the note, it will change the X position. Let's increase this intensity here. So nice already. So you've seen now how to use the keyboard as setting. Let's go to another layer and let's double click and let's load these cube. Let's enable it. Let's change the thickness. Let's change the size. Let's move it up here. Let's then go to the rotation here. And let's use modulation number 2 here. Let's set it to maximum. Let's now change the audio modulation and settings here. Still gate. Let's click play. So that's one way that you could use it. Okay, so I hope that was useful. So let's try something different again. So let's create an audio channel again, and this time let's load hammerhead. Okay, like so. Let's go inside hammerhead and let's create a simple pattern, kick, like so. And then the snare and the second and fourth staff. Let's click play. Yeah, fine. Let's close that. Let's load now Visual Synth. So we type VS and we load that as an insert effect. And let's open it now, maximize it. Brilliant. Okay, now again, let me put the noise down to minimal. Let's open up the additional controls. Here where it says audio modulation, let's change that to spectrum. Now let's click play. You can see the snare comes up here at this point. So let's click the frequency there. Let's change the threshold. Okay, hopefully that will work. So let's go to the modulation metrics and let's go to the second tab, radius. So here we go, and let's change the intensity on the radius from audio modulation number 1. Let's go back to the setting of the modulation engine. Let's click play and see if that works. So in this particular case, what you can see is that this material is responding only when the snare is being played, because I've selected this particular frequency where the snare is actually played as a sample. So in this case, you have this material on layer number 1 effectively animating only when the snares are played. Okay, so that is another way, another example of how you could use an input source and filter specifically frequency and then create animation. So the only other thing that probably I haven't showed is the glide here, but I think that is self-explanatory. So it's like the portamento. So when you're using MIDI input, you can set the glide, so the way it will move from one note to the other, and therefore it will impact the visual effect will be delayed. So similar to what happens to effectively almost like the attack for the engine, the envelope generator. So I think I covered most of the control, and with some examples as well on how you can use a visual synth. So I think it's a fantastic idea from Imaginando. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. I hope this was useful. If you have any additional questions, please leave them on the comments and I will answer them as soon as I can. Thank you. Bye.